A decision has been taken about a special military operation.
We are defending our independence, our country. Glory to Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine.
In the depths of winter, a growing menace. Russia flexing its muscles, preparing for something. Moscow said these were simply drills. It had no plans to invade. But for months it held a gun against Ukraine's head. The West was alarmed. Satellite images showed Russian forces massing along the border. What follows is the story of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as told by the BBC reporters who were there.
America's and Russia's top diplomats met in Geneva and at first couldn't even agree how to greet one another, with one question on everyone's lips.
Is an invasion likely, as President Biden suggested?
War is the last thing that people want here. But it won't be the public that decides this. It'll be the president. Whether he's willing to reach a deal or determined to continue with coercive diplomacy.
A month later, unmistakable signs. At the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin approved plans to recognize 2 separatist areas of Ukraine. And in a long, angry speech, he railed against NATO and said Ukraine wasn't even a real country. War was coming. Until early this morning, some here in Kiev doubted that he would do it. Not anymore.
I never thought this thing could happen, not in my lifetime. I'm lucky to be alive, but I'll do anything to protect Ukraine.
This country's civilian infrastructure is being heavily struck. There are no more flights in or out.
We will strive for the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. Russia cannot feel safe, develop and exist with a constant threat emanating from the territory of modern Ukraine.
So far, all the signs are that this attack is working out exactly the way Western leaders have been warning for weeks. The country is being attacked from all directions, and the fear now has to be that some of those Russian troops are heading here to the capital.
Ukrainian troops burned piles and piles of documents. The enemy is literally at the gates. Not far up the road, Ukrainian armor in a capital city braced for the worst.
This is actually the main road out of the capital. That way is Poland, it's Lviv in the west, and you've got the city there. We've got armored personnel carriers here and a whole line of traffic for as far as the eye can see, trying to get out.
From early morning in eastern Ukraine, we found queues at ATMs. Now there is war, people want cash in their pockets and fear it may run short.
We're shocked. We're totally shocked. We're afraid for our children, for our families.
The women and the children of Ukraine fleeing their country. You will not be allowed, the policeman shouts to the men on the stairwell, women and children only. The police move to help those allowed to board. What cannot be held must be let go until another day.
The latest Russian bombardments had hit yet more homes, injuring the very civilians the Kremlin promised had nothing to fear from what it calls a targeted attack on the Ukrainian military. Elena, a grandmother, says Russian occupation would be a disaster.
This is my city, the city of my parents, my grandparents. I am not going to leave.
And as for what she makes of Vladimir Putin,
when a person is so inadequate, nobody knows what will spring to his mind.
this evening the mind of President Zelensky was defiant. Speaking from the streets of Kiev, he posted this message on social media.
We are all here. Our soldiers are here. The citizens are here. We are defending our independence, our country, and it will continue this way. Glory to our defenders, both male and female. Glory to Ukraine.
This was Saturday in Dnipro. Women making Molotov cocktails in the park. Housewives, businesswomen and lawyers, all now preparing for the defence of their city.
Nobody thought that this would how we would spend our weekend. Nobody thought, but now we're doing this, and it seems like the only important thing to do now.
The aftermath of a deadly missile attack in the town of Zhytomyr. The target may have been an air base nearby, but family homes were destroyed. Oleg Rybak stands calmly in the rubble, but he has lost his wife. She was the light of my life, he says. She's the best thing that's happened to me. But I'm trying to keep myself together.
Welcome to the town of Borodianka, population 12,500. Parts of it are wasteland now of destruction in an increasingly dirty war. And resistance, though noble, is futile in the city of Kherson, conquered by Russian tanks, the first major urban area to fall in this war.
Ukrainian troops were moving back into Irpin, and this is why its people left. The civilians are getting out over what's left of a bridge that was blown to slow down the Russians if they take Irpin. Russian shells were very close.
Good luck,
There's a fair amount of incoming fire coming into this now. Artillery fire, there are loads of civilians around.
Head to the very eastern edge of Ukraine and a ghostly vision of the country's fate unfolds before you. The city of Kharkiv is being purged of life. In near total blackout, the police in the country's second largest city take us on patrol. The Russians aren't far.
But Russia's assault on the capital did not go according to plan. Armoured columns were attacked and destroyed. Russian losses mounted. By the end of March, the attempt to take Kiev was over.
Russia's defeat around Kiev may have started on this suburban street in the last few days of February, just after the invasion. A long column of Russian armour was destroyed as it pushed forward towards the capital.
A war barely 6 weeks old, but a landscape already scarred, littered with the wreckage of two armies locked in combat. But there's more. Stories of horrors inflicted on civilians. Allegations of war crimes.
This is the line of fire. That's how we shoot.
On the 7th of March, Alexander's drone unit showed civilians trying to get to Kiev to escape the Russians. And then they saw the tank. One of the cars was forced to stop. The driver tried to show he was harmless, and the Russians shot him dead. In a couple of hundred yards with Alexander from the Ukrainian army, we counted 11 other dead bodies.
In Bucha, close to Kiev, satellite images appear to show a mass grave. Signs of excavation beginning on March the 10th, when Russian troops controlled the area. As Bucha's remaining civilian population grapples with the scale of what's happened to them, the world is asking who did this, when, and why.
We believe these are war crimes. We believe it's genocide in the purest sense. Because children have been killed, women have been raped, and civilians executed.
In the basement of a building, we saw the bodies of 5 men, hands tied behind their backs.
People have been shot in the head by Russian snipers. People on bicycles, people delivering potatoes. I can tell you so many stories, but I don't want to. I want to forget them.
The more you talk to people in Bucha, the more you learn of the terror that this town lived through. A local resident told us that a woman riding a bicycle was shot on this street.
After they killed Irina Kostenko's only son Alexei, she had to bury him in their garden on her own.
The fighting now shifted to the east. Long, grinding artillery battles as Russian forces inched slowly forward. But out in the Black Sea came another dramatic setback for Russia's war effort.
This was the Moskva, Russia's prized warship in the Black Sea. Ukraine says its missiles hit the vessel. Russia says a fire caused the ship to sink.
The Ukrainian military are on the move in defense of the homeland. The landscape, flat, open country, perfect for heavy armor, as Russia readies to seize the Donbass region.
The first sounds of spring now drowned out by heavy shelling. Russia's making small gains, but creating widespread chaos and devastation right across the region. Lysychansk has become an underground city. They say they're running out of clean water and food. There is no peace from the constant barrage of artillery. It's becoming yet another Russian war of attrition. They're trying to break Ukrainian forces along a front line that stretches for 300 miles.
Further south, one of the war's biggest tragedies had been unfolding for weeks: the destruction of an entire city.
The city in agony. Mariupol burning. Apartment blocks in ruins after 2 weeks of unrelenting Russian bombardments.
Mariupol is a big, important city, and the Russians need to capture it to help their advance here into southern Ukraine. And their tactics are becoming brutally familiar. If you can't seize a city, then simply flatten it, whatever the cost in human lives.
Survivors emerge from the wreckage after what Ukraine says was a Russian airstrike on a maternity hospital. The local governor says pregnant women are among the wounded.
In the besieged city of Mariupol, a theatre was hit where the deputy mayor says civilians were sheltering.
Russian forces are gaining more ground. These pictures were filmed with their troops at the theatre where so many lives were lost. Yesterday, there was some success in getting residents out of Mariupol to safety, but some convoys came under attack and tens of thousands are still trapped.
I could not leave at first because my mom can barely walk. There's no way I would have left her behind. There was constant shelling.
The last bastion of Ukraine's resistance is the Azovstal steel plant, perhaps a few thousand soldiers and civilians in its bunkers and tunnels.
This is our appeal to the world. It could be the last of our lives. We are probably facing our final days, if not hours. The enemy is outnumbering us 10 to 1.
Finally, after 2 months, women and children were allowed out into the light. It's been a brutal and bloody 83 days, but their battle is over, for now.
Further north, the war seemed to be grinding almost to a halt, both sides suffering terrible losses.
The shells start landing closer as the Russians adjust their aim. We're heading back? No. So you get a sense of what Russia's artillery and tanks can do to Ukrainian homes. This is relentless.
Residents praying for salvation as Russia lays waste. Nearby, the rush to evacuate civilians.
Ukraine's artillery lines were still firing, even as their troops were pulling out of nearby Lysychansk. This unit has been relying on mostly old Soviet-era artillery, still waiting for more Western weapons to arrive.
But while the fighting raged in the east, nowhere in Ukraine was truly safe.
This inferno is not a Ukrainian military target. It's a Ukrainian shopping centre. These were the bewildering minutes after Russia's latest devastating missile attack. Today, on the central city of Kremenchuk.
A man filmed this right after the Russian missiles hit Vinnytsia. And now this whole square is a disaster scene. There are dozens of rescuers here working through the debris, the wreckage of this missile strike. This was a building of offices, there were shops at the bottom, and they're all completely destroyed.
Now, in Istanbul, a rare diplomatic breakthrough, a deal to resume grain exports.
For the first time in a long time, a major artery is unblocked. And a ship, which could save millions from hunger, moving slowly into hostile waters. The Razoni, the first grain vessel to leave Ukraine since the 24th of February, making its way out to Lebanon. And the hope is that it will be the first of many in a route which will allow vessels in and out of what is still an active war zone.
And now, at the height of summer, the tide of the war began to turn. This was the aftermath of a ferocious Ukrainian attack on a key bridge in Russian-controlled territory, the start of a series of Ukrainian counterattacks that took Russia by surprise, made possible by the arrival of highly accurate American weapons.
Running for cover in Russian-controlled Crimea. Russia says ammunition was detonated, but there are suggestions supporters of Ukraine may have caused the blast.
The latest satellite imagery gives a much clearer idea about the damage done at the airbase. Several modern Sukhoi bombers were destroyed, and there was a great deal of damage to the surrounding base infrastructure too.
Ukraine's rapid counter-offensive is gaining ground. Its troops taking some casualties, but also taking territory on several fronts. In some areas, Russia's front line has collapsed. And liberation has come.
Все добре, все добре.
For 6 months we prayed you would come, she says.
Under pressure in Ukraine, Russia's president has chosen the path that is most familiar to him: escalation. 7 months after invading Ukraine, the Kremlin is calling up 300,000 reservists.
I want the Kiev authorities and their real masters in the West to hear me, so that they remember this forever. People in Luhansk and Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia are becoming our citizens forever.
Навсегда. Moscow says these territories are joining Russia after holding referendums, but they've been widely discredited.
Ukraine will get back what belongs to her, both in the east and in the south. What they try to annex now, and Crimea, which they annexed in 2014. Our flag will be everywhere.
Ukrainian forces on the move again. This time taking back villages in the south. Progress has been slow here since the summer, but this all seemed to happen quickly, again taking Russia by surprise. Russia now has major headaches on 2 fronts at the same time, just when it's trying to conscript, train and equip badly needed extra troops. Vladimir Putin may have celebrated annexing chunks of Ukraine, but his problems just keep multiplying.
This is the bridge that links Russia to annexed Crimea, and it was under attack. Russian officials claim a lorry had been blown up here, and that the fire then spread to a fuel train, and parts of the road had collapsed into the sea.
Kherson's residents emerged from their homes as the first Ukrainian soldiers reached the main square. For them, it's the end of more than 8 months under occupation. It is the best, said Titiana. A Sunday without Russians, even the air. I can breathe. The Ukrainians have got a lot to celebrate because they've scored a major victory over the Russians, much more quickly and smoothly than they expected. And while the Russians have left behind them a great deal of damage, for now the Ukrainians aren't focusing on that because they believe they've taken a giant step forward to victory.
But with winter coming, Russia had already resorted to a new strategy: a war on Ukraine's infrastructure. After months of quiet in the capital, the war is back. For 3 chaotic hours this morning, the missiles kept coming. For one young woman already recording her own sense of shock, a narrow escape.
A major city in the south of the country.
My BBC colleague Hugo Bashega was broadcasting live when it all began.
So,
the target destroyed the whole infrastructure of Ukraine, destroyed infrastructure in our hometown. They left people freezing in the winter, less people do it without electricity.
Engineers from Ukraine's biggest energy company head out to work. Today's job, a downed electricity cable. Landmines mean they can't work beyond the tape. The authorities, in their words, want to give people power and warmth, but the shelling isn't stopping and it's happening right across this region.
Inna's makeshift home is built where her old one used to be, but the kitchen is freezing and damp. Icy water drips from the roof. Her swollen hands hurt from the cold, but she looks far beyond her own worries.
I want us to win as soon as possible, so that there is peace and tranquility, so that all soldiers return home alive and well.
As winter drags on and the country freezes, Ukraine's long agony continues. Despite its many setbacks, Russia still controls territory and with missiles and drones inflicts suffering. This all-out war, unthinkable a year ago, has no obvious end in sight.